ahead and turn things over to Steve Walton. He's our guest speaker today, talking on the electrical infrastructure. Steve had been working for Contract Land Staff or CLS and recently changed over to Pike Engineering. Steve has been active in the group from in the beginning days, so and has done everything from being an attorney to being a pipeline inspector to doing acquisition. He's got a pretty full resume. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn everything over to Steve and let him begin his presentation.
Great. Thank you, sir. Can everyone hear me? I don't have the best computer in the world, but can everyone hear me clearly? Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to start with a screen share and a quick disclaimer. So let's see if we can make this work first. Everyone seeing the first slide, electric generation, transmission, distribution? So thumbs up, Johnny?
Okay. Yeah, also, before you get started, just to let everybody know, once he starts sharing the screen, you should see a little slider. I know on my screen it's on the bottom left-hand corner, and you can adjust seeing the attendance to what's being shared to the screen. So if you'd like to adjust that, that's the way to do that. And we can hear you fine.
Okay, very good. So quick disclaimer, most speaking engagements I've done were pre-COVID, so I'm used to being in front of a crowd of varying sizes and using PowerPoint behind me as a distraction and a crutch and a life preserver if I start stumbling over words. This is a bit unique to me where I'm seeing nothing but predominantly my slide. I hope that my slides don't drive the presentation and it becomes robotic, but if it does, please chime in and say, hey, Steve, we can read a slide, give me some more information. I won't feel bad if you say that, but I'm going to try to avoid that as best I can. So here's my contact information. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, job leads in Georgia or the South, let me know. So I'm a project manager with Pike Engineering, and Pike Engineering is one of the design builders who contract with Georgia Power on its grid project. Grid is a statewide program to revitalize the entire electric grid in the state of Georgia, and we'll get into a little bit of that in the slides. Georgia Power is actually one of the kind of brand names under the real company, which is Southern Company. So Southern Company, really big company, handles most of electric transmission distribution in kind of the southeast region. So I work for Georgia Power through Pike Engineering, but Southern Co. really handles more. So if you like Florida or Alabama or possibly Mississippi, I'm not sure their exact region, Southern Co. is a place to look to Google their career page and see if maybe they have some openings down here. So just kind of to give you my bona fides, here's, the left is the Esquire version of me, and that was a decade plus ago, eager, fresh, ready to hit the world. Realized I don't really like attorneys and kind of stumbled backward into acquisition of right-of-way on a large interstate pipeline project, and haven't looked back since, and I love what I do. So I went from suit and tie and mahogany desks to where the mahogany started in the woods because we knocked them down, and then where I ended up on construction inspection toward the end in the last couple of years out there deep in the hills with a bunch of construction crews blowing stuff up and tearing stuff down. So, but that is all to say I'm not looking back, and I wouldn't look back. I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I still find use for my legal training. It's not as if it's gone to waste. It's, we're out here buying and selling and conveying real property at some level. And we have contracts. So everything we do on a daily basis, obviously you all know, there's a legal component to that. So understanding kind of the legal aspects of what we do can't hurt anyone to become very, very adept at what they do. So I know some don't share this opinion. It's always been my opinion. To me, right-of-way is right-of-way and easements are easements. I frankly don't care whether I'm putting pipe in the ground or electric lines into the ground or power lines above the ground. Surface rights, to me, it's all the same. A lot of people they have a different mindset. That's my mindset. I don't care what it is I'm buying. I need to understand it. But to me, right away is right away, and easements are easements. So that's where I see our role as agents, as you know, is to me essentially can be boiled down to we're trying to buy or sell something to or from someone who doesn't even know that they want to buy or sell it. So it's not like an arm's length transaction where you post a car on Facebook and I want to buy it. You know, we're coming out cold to these folks, and obviously, as we all know, you know, they didn't realize that they wanted to sell us an easement. They didn't realize that they even wanted to sell us right away. So it's our job to get them to understand why we're there. Just a fun slide. We've all run into all of these. These are not pictures from my experience, but they're pictures of my experience and probably yours as well. Especially the shyster attorney. I kind of put that in comically, but I actually prefer to have an attorney in the mix than just a landowner. I like him because it seems to ease the transaction. We're kind of speaking the same language, and we have a person that the landowner trusts that they're dealing with as opposed to having to deal directly with us. So even though I mock shyster attorneys, when it comes to the real world, I actually prefer that an attorney is somewhere in the mix. That makes, I think, my job a lot easier. And we've all met public outcry about what we're out there trying to acquire and why we're trying to acquire. And we're on the front line, so we all face a lot of this flack, and we're just, you know, we're a piece of the process, but we're the first person they see, so we catch a lot of it, and we've got to be prepared. I'm getting a little feedback. I'm not sure if that's my fault. If it is, I'll try to make it stop it.
I think we've got real quick. I think Leslie's on twice video on her computer and on her phone, so you can make sure everybody mute their microphones.
Okay.
Thank you, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, I love that picture of Rudy Giuliani.
And is that a picture of the dog I hear?
Yeah, that's a dog. I'll mute it. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, Leslie, I think you're still connected on your phone as well. I see your phone number.
I kind of like that audio accompaniment to the killer gnarling dog. That works nicely. So,
all right, guys, are we good now? Is that better?
Feedback.
Yeah, we're good, I think.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. So, in my opinion, in any negotiation, when we're out there, what makes me more likely to be successful than not is I've got to understand two things. What exactly is it that I'm acquiring and why? So there's a difference between an easement and a right-of-way. Landowners don't understand that, obviously. Sometimes we're putting stuff in existing easements, and they think it's their property, and it's our job to explain to them, yes, it's your property, but you're not going to get full compensation on this because we're putting this underground electric wire in the right-of-way, and we want to be kind to you, but understand that it's not necessarily completely your property. You don't have that whole stick, that whole bundle of rights that we talked about in law school. So to me, before I even hit the ground, I want to make sure I understand what it is I'm trying to acquire, what easement or right-of-way, what type, and why. Why is it important to the bigger picture? So when we get now directly into the electric grid, so I have become a quick study, but I have a ton to learn. So if there's any engineering questions specific to electric infrastructure, probably have to punt, but I've got a little bit of knowledge, probably just enough to be dangerous. This slide just kind of explains the expansive nature of our electric system in the United States. It's a huge interconnected web of lines and machines and equipment and substations and power generation stations rather. When we say the electric grid, we're talking about a huge, massive interconnected system that brings ultimately the electricity to our homes that that turns our lights on. So electricity, the electric grid's generally broken into kind of three major components. You've got the generation side, that's what produces the energy. Solar, wind, coal, nuke. Something is probably turning some turbine of some kind and generating electricity. So we've got to get it then from those power plants out into individual homes. There's an intermediate step, which is the transmission facilities. Those are generally the substations and those huge, massive metal poles that you see running with high tension, high level, big thick power lines. Those are carrying thousands of kilowatts. That's not feeding a home directly. It's got to make it to its next step, which is the distribution facilities. That's where we connect out of the substations, get onto the wooden poles or underground. We're decreasing the voltage to make it capable for use in residential and commercial homes and businesses. Got to get that voltage down to usable. Same thing here, same concept, just a more outlined version. You start up here at the power station. You get into the transmission lines. It's always linking into a substation of some kind, dropping the voltage, getting it out to the distribution lines, and then on to businesses and homes. So the problem that we have in the United States isn't uncommon, and it's kind of newsworthy with all the infrastructure bill negotiations in Congress. Not unlike the pipelines that we were revamping on a project in Pennsylvania, these power lines nationwide are pretty old. So the lines are old, the poles are old, the infrastructure is old, the equipments are old, the capacitors, the transformers. Most of what you're going to see out there, if it hasn't been revamped recently, it probably hasn't been touched in quite a long time. And here's what happens when you have that problem. We experience as a nation a lot of outages, and they can be related to the age of the equipment. It could also be related to weather events. And weather events, obviously, you can't change Mother Nature, but we can have more shored up facilities that can withstand storms, hurricanes, high winds, tree falls. There's things that are being done to the electric grid system that, while they're not changing Mother Nature, they're being better prepared for what Mother Nature does or might bring in the future. So this is just a quick slide that the folks who probably know most about this give it what I would consider a failing grade. So the Engineering Society has recognized long ago the need to revamp our electric grid system. I think Texas was a good, pretty recent example. A snowstorm, which I lived in Dallas for years. We didn't see snow, so it's not a common event, but for a snowstorm, ice storm to essentially knock out that size of an area tells you we've got some grid problems. We've got some infrastructure problems that have to be dealt with. So what the industry is moving toward is revitalization of the electric grid, and they're calling it the smart grids. And anytime you read smart, there's now going to be a computer involved somewhere in the system. They are bringing the old grid system into the century that we're in now, and computers are going to have a part to play. They're going to be put into these systems, and they're going to be a check and balance and a means of rerouting electricity from a down line to a circuit that's still live. They're going to monitor usage. They're going to monitor outages. So when you see the word smart grid, it's just telling you somewhere in the system we're going to start seeing a lot more computer-generated work being done inside that system. And for the acquisition agents, this is a good thing, because with any revitalization, there's change, and that's going to necessitate more right-of-way. At the end of the day, whether we're improving, building, replacing, there's a role for us to play as acquisition agents in that process to get these new easements and right-of-way that can allow these companies and these engineering firms and Georgia Power and the like to do the work that they need to revitalize this whole system. Just a fanciful slide, just kind of trying to bring home again that computers are the way of the future, and we're going to see that computers, just like in our cars, just like in every aspect of our life, they're going to get more intertwined with the delivery of electricity to our homes. So we recently had a power outage, and a loved one of mine said, "Oh, hey, you better call the electric company." And I was thinking, well, this isn't 1950. Trust me, they already know. I mean, that's part of this automation that's already in play. They know when the electricity is down. They know exactly what circuit it went down on. They have already sent an electric signal to a computer that's rerouting it to another circuit. So it's becoming into the future. So kind of the old ways of power generation, we were primarily fossil fuels, a little bit of and a little bit of hydro in the mix. As we move forward, we're going to expand the means by which the power is generated, especially with the infrastructure bill that's been passed, and then the soft one. Those two things combined, and then just the natural push of, I guess, society and in the world, we're going to see new ways that we generate the electricity in the first place. So I don't personally foresee us ever, my lifetime certainly not, eliminating fossil fuels altogether, but there's no mistaking, should not be delusional, that as a world, we are definitely trying to move away from the fossil fuels. So here's a kind of a charted example showing that, back in the day, oil, gas, and coal, made up the lion's share of the generation. That's not being forecasted. We're going to see those drop off, and we're going to see hydro, wind, solar, and others, storage, taking up that space that used to be or soon won't be consumed completely by the fossil fuels and stuff. Now, again, when I talk about transmission, so now we have generated the power at some facility, and now we're trying to get it into homes and businesses. And you've got the two-phase of that, which is the large transmission towers, and then the smaller distribution systems and all the infrastructure that's along that line. So Georgia Power and elsewhere, they're doing several things to shore up that distribution side, transmission distribution side. As we talked about, they're putting a lot of automated devices, computers, into the system that will automatically identify outages, reroute power to other circuits. A lot of work I see being done, especially down here, is relocating these power lines. Sometimes it's cheaper to just get new right-of-way and move the lines all together than try to go back out, pull easements from the 1930s, and figure out if we have the right to cut down trees in a 15-foot wide swath on either side of the existing line. So I'm seeing a fair bit of relocation work where we're just take these lines somewhere else altogether. And then what I work on primarily on the underground, on the grid system, is underground. We are statewide trying to take a lion's share of those power lines as distribution lines that are running between poles and getting them underground. And that's an interesting aspect of right-of-way acquisition. We don't have enough room within the existing corridor to put everything we need. So we're finding ourselves having to acquire new easements, new rights-of-way, to move the power lines to underground facilities and then to install those facilities that are required. But that's the trend that I'm seeing, at least in Georgia, and I'm going to guess it's probably going to be nationwide, where we're just taking off the poles. And the reasons are several, but one easy one is a tree can't knock down an underground line. A car veering off the road can't knock out an underground power line. They can knock out a power pole, and a tree can knock down a line, but if it's underground, those things are a little more shored up, a little more safe. So that's one of the biggest ways I see, at least, that we're shoring up that distribution transmission system. So what does that mean to us in the right-of-way field? Well, there's new types of easements and rights-of-way that will have to be acquired. So we're not just getting that 100-foot swath with a temporary construction easement to put in some pipeline. There's some novel equipment coming in that didn't exist, and there are new ways of installing these lines that aren't just attaching them to a pole that we've already had existing rights on. So the easement and right-of-way types are changing, and that requires us to kind of get up with the times. And so I kind of dovetail back to what I said. I don't personally see a huge difference in the general right-of-way. Right-of-way is right-of-way to me. And I think there are certain skills that we all probably have if we're successful that aren't going to change just because you're in the electric. You know, you have to dress right, speak right, develop trust, develop rapport, and then after that, know what it is that we're asking for and why we're asking for it. And I think if you come to the table with those and you're leaving pipeline or you're leaving leasing or leaving whatever avenue that you're in, and if you're looking to get into the electric field, bring those skills that you've already acquired and developed, bring them with you, add a couple little bits of information about electricity and how we do it, and be successful.
Hey, Steve, I had a quick question. As far as relocating or putting stuff in the ground, are electric lines that are underground marked similar to like a pipeline or a water line that there's actually markers indicating there's something in the ground?
No, the markers, if you're talking about the yellow markers for a pipeline when it crosses
Correct.
the road, no, there's no above ground markings other than the physical equipment like the transformers. So if you've ever seen on a telephone pole or electric pole, the transformer looks like a big crock pot. That helps to step down the voltage to get it to a residential use level. Those are coming off the poles, and now they're going to be these little 2x2 by about 2 foot high green cabinets that sit just off a 90-degree bend off the underground line. So we try to run the underground power lines as best we can through the existing right-of-way. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. And then jut into these various pieces of equipment. But to answer your question, no, we don't provide any markings for where the stuff is. Hopefully everyone 811s before they go out there and stand there. Pretty much along that corridor where your power lines were on a pole. They're very near to that. They're just underground rather. And then you'll see people hey, there's something in. Yeah, it's interesting. And I just got a home here in the development, and I've got AT&T and pretty big part of the power circuit coming through my yard, and I know what they are because I know what to look for, but your average person who isn't involved in electricity would be like, I didn't know that. And that's what happens a lot in Georgia. These new developments have all underground. They come off of some kind of transmission or distribution solar facility outside of the community, come in underground, and then sweep their way through the entire development all underground. So you'll see a couple boxes here and there, and that tells you there's a power line. But 811, I put a shovel on the ground, let you know where you did.
Hey, Steve, I got a quick question for you. It's Leslie.
Hi,
So,
Leslie.
hi. So a lot of times I see a lot of sharing of above ground right of way with cable companies,
Yep.
power companies, phone companies. Is that typical with moving things underground? Is there a lot of sharing or, purchasing of right of way between different
No,
companies?
for the most part, they stay on the poles. So that's one of the things that makes our job a little more difficult is we're moving the power lines underground. And the people would naturally think, well, that's great, that big ugly pole's gone. It's not, because there's still fiber optic telecommunications, sometimes even other providers' lines. We have a lot of electric cooperatives down here in Georgia. Sometimes we share poles with them. So the long-winded answer, the short answer is no. I wish we would move everything underground right at the same time, but we don't. So we as a power code don't wait for AT&T or whomever, Verizon, to get their stuff off the poles, so those poles stay there. And now, but that's a great point, and I have to believe. I did a little bit of cable franchise work way back in the 90s. I think you've hit on something where I think in due course, these companies will be moving their lines underground for the same reasons we're moving the power lines underground. So now they're coming to us to co-locate within our electric easement, and that's some new work for agents right there. And then understanding co-location rights and what's the breadth of the original easement. Does it grant exclusivity to the power company, or is the lease or easement rather written broadly enough that we can, as electric companies, say, sure, power or sure, fiber optic, come on in our ground. So that's a great question. right now, no. At least in Georgia, no. We're just moving power lines. But I think you're absolutely right to think that at some point they're coming off those poles too, and these poles are going to be the most. So where electric and right of way I think differ maybe on some specifics is the facilities, obviously. So there's an engineering aspect that agents tend to have a little bit. We don't have to be engineers. We're not engineers. We don't pretend to be, but we have to have some. We have to know our way around a construction set. I've noticed that a lot like DOT work. You know, you'll get your DOT plans. We're moving the right of way out to avoid the DOT's work. Um, so it's not just a line list, anymore where you go out and just start acquiring parcels. There's a little bit of engineering understanding involved in it, and we're buying different things. So there's solar, wind, underground. Eventually, charging stations. I think is going to be a hot area for right away. There's going to be electric vehicle charging stations, I think, in a lot of places. Well, those are going to require probably new facilities, maybe some easements and work there too. So it's an exciting time, I think, for right away. We're not we're seeing a new area to maybe make some money. So I just wanted to offer this as an example. This was actually a road project that was pushing our electric utilities back. So my acquisitions were based on getting out of the Department of Transportation's way. But when I started getting these for the first time, I thought back to my first pipeline acquisition. I thought, I never saw anything like this. They gave me a line list, and I went out and called people, knocked on their door, and got an easement. I never had to deal with anything like this. Well, in this work, more often than not, I'm finding myself having to read this, understand it, be able to communicate with engineering a lot to interface. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting side too. I'm finding that this, pipeline's pretty much going to go where it's going to go, and we may reroute for different reasons to avoid wetlands or some landowner who refuses. But for the most part, it's going where it's going. There seems like there's a lot more play in the engineering of this electric work because they have, these certain kind of equipment don't have to go right by the pole. They can kind of go anywhere. So these design builders will lay it out on a construction set, but we as agents have to be conversant with the engineers to say, I've got a hard no on this parcel, and can we move it? And we have to know what we're looking at, what equipment it is, what the equipment type is, where it can go. Not to say this is anything special or like people that do electric or anything. It's just different. It's a little bit different than I was used to when I was out there. So this kind of dovetails with what I said. We all have bought a lot of stuff that's on or under the surface. Well, with this new generation system that's coming to be, we're going to have new easements. A solar easement isn't just getting the easement for the land so that we can put the solar panels on it. Part of that easement is going to contemplate that parcel owner and hopefully others can't do anything, build up any obstructions that are going to block the sun and in the direction of the sun. Same thing with wind. We're not just getting a big old plot where we can put up some monster turbines. There are other easement rights that are coming along with those specific types of easements that are something that we probably in the pipeline industry, maybe the woodwork and bridge work just never really had to contemplate or deal with. That it's an issue in this. So all this is of interest to me and hopefully to you, that we're finding an area that's going to broaden and expand and might provide us all with opportunities to just keep doing what we enjoy for a long period of time. We might have to relocate, but maybe not. I mean, there's electric everywhere, and that's the upside of it. But it only comes with money, and we've just seen, I think, I stopped trying to figure out what iteration of the bill has been approved by which House of Congress and what's actually going to land on Biden's desk. I'm not certain, but I know that there's money and a lot of it that is earmarked for clean energy, and that doesn't have to be a bad word for us because clean energy just means there's a new means of generation of that electricity. Clean doesn't have to be bad. Clean means, okay, I'm out there getting solar panels and wind turbines and hydro facilities instead of just just getting a big site for a nuke plant. So it's not a bad thing from our professional standpoint. And a lot of the money is being put in to upgrade the existing systems. So I think government brain understand we're not flipping a switch and going green. There's a transition, and it's probably decades long before we get to whatever the goal is, renewables versus fossil fuels. But during my lifetime, and probably everyone on this call's lifetime, we're still going to be working to upgrade that grid. That's still replacing those lines, those transmission facilities, those distribution facilities, moving underground, building computers into the system, the solar, the wind. These are all areas that are going to be around for quite some time, and now they're being funded. So where there's funding, there's projects, and where there's projects, there's need to acquire easements. So we're going to hopefully see a bright future in our right of way.
Hey, Steve. One of the things I constantly see, and if I'll send everybody's contact information out in an email after this event. But Steve, if you want to stop sharing, if you're done with your presentation, take some questions. My first question would be is that as you see the popularity of electric vehicles coming in, are household electric services or the communities, if you had a street, are the electric grid currently going to be able to accommodate those charging stations at individual houses, like a street of 25, if they're an older service? Is that part of this infrastructure plan that you guys are working on in
So I
Georgia?
would assume that the existing lines and the voltage requirements that would be drawn by adding new equipment. I don't see any need to upgrade the system from what is currently planned for the upgrade. Obviously, there's new equipment pieces that have to be added for the charging stations, but where I kind of see the work is kind of more of a surface site. So I anticipate, like we have gas stations now, we're probably going to have electric charging stations. And there may be some intermixing of those two for the time being, but I also see venture capitalists coming out saying, hey, let's take this 2 acres of farmland over here, let's build a charging station. We're half a mile off the turnpike, for God's sake. So from the right of way, not so much having to revamp the electric system to accommodate the charging of those vehicles, but certainly areas where rights are going to have to be acquired from landowners to get these things in place.
Hey, Steve, it's Leslie again.
Yes, Leslie.
I got another question. Where do you deal much with eminent domain in this? And do you see that with this new federal infrastructure package and stuff? I mean, do you see where it's going to be a situation where right-of-way agents may be dealing with eminent domain?
We have it. These are public works projects, but Georgia Power doesn't want to pull that card. So I can't speak for other providers other than Georgia Power. They're concerned about public relations and public opinion. So everything I'm doing out here, it goes under Georgia's eminent domain laws, and we have the right, but we're not allowed to pull that card even talking about it. I remember Pipeline was a little more aggressive. We had it. We weren't supposed to talk about it, so we had to, but if push came to shove, they were going to. I'm not finding that. And I think partly because of a pipeline's kind of got to go where it's got to go. This electric, they can, I don't have to put a box on your property because I can put it somewhere further down the circuit than somebody else's. So I think public relations is one reason, at least Georgia Power steers away from it. Just kind of the flexibility of these electric systems as they design and build them lends itself to not having to really pull that card. But no, these are public utility projects. These fit well within under the definition of eminent domain statutes, I'm sure, in most states. But my experience is down here, at least they don't want to.
And just another quick follow-up question. Can you give me some idea of like a payout spread? I mean, what do you see when you're paying what per foot or whatever? Like, I mean, is it comparable to pipeline right-of-way payment, or
No, because we
not
don't
to get?
quantify the undergrounding. So the conventional wisdom is if it coming off the pole to your house, why would anybody pay for that? Because you have to get electric to your house, so we're providing you a service for free. When it comes to this grid system and pieces of equipment, at least Georgia Power, we've quantified it based on the displaced acreage of each piece of equipment. So every piece of equipment has its own dimensions, and then we try to go a certain number of feet outside of that, mainly because the technicians have this long insulated pole that they need to open up the doors of these cabinets to get in and de-energize them or re-energize so they can get into work. So most of our easements are kind of these circular displaced acreages around the perimeter size of a piece of equipment, and Georgia Power has developed statewide guidelines for what that pricing is. So if I come knocking and you've got 10 acres, I'm not really impacting 10 acres. It's not like I'm cutting a swath through your property. I'm probably putting the underground lines in the existing utility corridor, and I'd like to put a couple pieces of equipment. The most of the comp I see, like 1,000. I think the most I ever really deal with is probably shy of 10,000, and that's for a cubicle farm where we're probably on a commercial location and we're probably placing 5, 6, 7 pieces of equipment. So no, this isn't. Nobody's retiring on this money. Nobody's getting rich on this money, and it's not going to be passed down to their heirs. This is kind of a one-shot. Help us help the world in Georgia and elsewhere get a reliable electric service.
If you've got I have one more question. So,
All the time in the room.
you sat by me. You know how I am with questions. So,
Are you good at what you do?
so let's just say if you have this knowledge, what kind of money are you talking about for a right-of-way agent? I mean, is it comparable to what they would pay like day rates for land agents on pipeline, or is it
Yep.
less because it's comparable? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I haven't seen per diems in many years, and that includes on the pipeline end. So I've kind of given up on those. But no, the day rates are at the same exact level. My day rate's a tad higher. Well, when I was a right-of-way agent as opposed to project manager, but the right-of-way agent on electric projects is very comparable to what folks are making up north. We're in that 275 to 3.25 based on experience kind of bandwidth of day rate. And it's pretty
Hey, Steve. Hey, Steve. This is Mike Nat. You made some comments about the aging power lines, I guess, or whatever. What is the usual lifetime of an existing overhead line?
Yeah, it's less the lifespan as it is its resiliency. So these lines are encased and they could probably last 10 lifetimes. The problem is more of, you've got a line on a wooden pole that has an anchor bolt, and that thing gets hit by a branch and the whole system comes down. So it's not that it's aging in terms of it's outlived its useful capacity. It's just not resilient to what happens in our work. So, that a lot of the work they do when they replace the line, we're looking at bigger lines, and we're looking at more shored up poles and cross members and things that can withstand wind better and can withstand, a falling branch or a Mustang coming around the corner and clipping this thing. That's what we're seeing. So you see a lot of concrete metal poles where wooden poles used to be, and it's not because the wood's going to die. That wood's going to be there forever, but what's going to withstand the hit of a truck? It's going to be the metal or the concrete. It's not going to be the wood. So the answer to your question, yeah, it's these facilities for the most part can stand the test of time. It's just conditions we've learned cause the interruptions to service. And that's why they're building redundant systems in. So even where they can't avoid, it's can't outdo Mother Nature. So some level of wind or rain or sleet or ice or trees they're going to pull down a line. So that's why they built a lot of redundancy into the system to, okay, you can take that pole out, but it's not going to knock out an entire city circuit anymore. We're going to reroute this power or tie it in, switch it into another system.
All right.
But
Do we
thank
have
you for
any
the
other?
question.
Go ahead, Steve. Any other questions?
Comment, if I might.
Go ahead,
Um,
Harry.
it's interesting, Ty, I actually have an opening right now. If anybody is interested in applying for it, and it's electric transmission right-of-way agent. It's in Salisbury, Maryland. That it's an existing project that I'm trying to put somebody on it. So if anybody's interested, feel free to reach out. But I 100% agree with Steve on the range. I think he's dead on.
By the way, Harry, I did forward that to the president of Chapter 14, Maryland, D.C. So I did put that into their hands.
Appreciate it.
Do we have any other questions for Steve or any comments to bring up? Okay, well, let's give our speaker a big round of applause and appreciate his time today.